everyone, hello and welcome to Ciphr's first webinar for 2024. What's in store for HR this year? It's our look ahead to the trends and challenges facing UK organisations over the next 12 months. Great to have you with us today. I'm Catherine Newbury, I'm Head of Content here at Ciphr, and I'm joined by Bradley Burgoyne, our Director of Customer Operations and former Director of Talent. Welcome, Bradley. How are you today?
I'm very well, thanks, Catherine. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Almost raring to go, but still just fending off those January blues, I think, a little bit. Here's a look at our agenda before we get stuck in. We're going to take you through the likely impact of macroeconomic, business and societal trends on HR, how HR software spending could change this year and why, the role of technology and working with a specialist HR solutions provider, the top 5 challenges HR teams will focus on in 2024 and how to tackle them. And also we'll have time at the end for answering your questions. So do send in questions and comments and feedback about the trends we're picking up. Send them in at any time and we'll look at those at the end. This webinar is being recorded and the recording will be emailed to you later today. If you don't know Ciphr, we're a specialist provider of integrated HR, learning, recruitment and payroll solutions. We're trusted by more than 600 organisations across the UK. If you want to find out more about any of our software or services, you can email info@ciphr.com. or you can opt in using the exit survey that you'll see when this broadcast ends. So the trends we're discussing today haven't been plucked out of thin air, and we conducted an internal survey of Ciphr staff in November last year. More than 40 staff participated from a range of functions, with particularly high responses from our people in L&D teams, our implementation consultants, and actually our software engineering team. More than a quarter of respondents hold a CIPD qualification. So it's their views and perspectives that Bradley will be talking about now in the broadcast, and also layering on just some more detail about some of the challenges we picked up there. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Bradley.
Thank you, Catherine. So before we kind of kick into the big picture impact in HR piece, I think I just want to pick up on the point Catherine said there, which was really interesting, which was that the people completing this survey often were in roles that weren't necessarily senior HR figures within the organisation. They were quite close to the front line, engaging in day-to-day conversations with HR professionals. And I think that just puts a really interesting glance on it, because they're not necessarily the leaders and what they're thinking. It's more about what are people hearing through the conversations they're having with HR professionals, really close to the ground, really on that front line of that conversation. And I think that kind of puts a bit of an interesting spin on it, because there might be a gap maybe between what leadership are thinking about, and is that filtering all the way down to those frontline roles and those frontline conversations in the HR space. So we'll dive into it and we'll see what interesting analysis it's thrown up. I just kind of wanted to reinforce that point there. So we're gonna delve into how much of that has filtered down. So when we asked our internal colleagues through the conversations they've been having with HR professionals, what are those significant trends that are out there in the market that we see, or they see and they hear, as having a potential moderate to significant effect on HR teams and organizations? And you can see on the screen here the kind of ones that emerged at the top of that list. So immigration and changes around immigration as we've left the EU, and the complexities of that is definitely starting to filter through as being a significant trend that is causing impact out there for HR professionals and teams. The rising cost of business in line with the rising cost of living, those two things seem to almost be interlinked. They're kind of in a locked spiral with each other. Skill shortage. This is an interesting one, because this one has been now on there for a number of years. I'm sure many of us over the last few years have heard lots of conversations around skill shortage and the challenge that's bringing. Doesn't show any signs of abating or letting up as we head into 2024. The growth of hybrid and remote working, it feels like we still haven't got a full grip on what that looks like, and are our plans robust around what is office, what is hybrid, what is home. I don't think anyone yet has still stumbled across the right answer, and there might not be a right answer for that, but it's definitely a trend that is coming up yet again for 2024. The mental and physical well-being of our colleagues continues to be a trend as we look at this year. as well as the potential threat to a recession in the UK. And again, those two things again tend to be very interlinked. You know, how are we doing out there in terms of the broader UK economy and the net effect that has on the mental and physical well-being of our colleagues and our customers. And just some interesting kind of comments that were thrown up as the kind of verbatim alongside the marks that you see here. You know, many of these trends are linked together, like we said. You know, the cost of living, wages, the high interest rates, and that was discussed quite a lot in the verbatim comments, and that equally has that impact on the mental health and physical well-being of our people. Working closely with people means that anything that affects employees, we need to work closely with them to understand what is it that's affecting them so we can change and put support plans in effectively. And definitely there was an overarching theme through the conversations our colleagues have been having with HR professionals that we are seeing higher levels of turnover. We are definitely seeing a lot of restructures and downsizing and potential kind of budget challenges happening within organizations. And that's having, you know, that's coming as a wider result of those impacts we've spoke about up here, as well as some of the technological disruptions that are coming in that are having that impact on people's world of work, and therefore forcing organizations to think very differently about how they're gearing up. And all of those things are feeding those trends that we see up there at the top. Moving on to kind of other trends that are still notable, but not necessarily appearing significantly for a lot of our colleagues. The immigration thing wasn't consistent across everywhere, right? So for some people, it really mattered a lot. For other sectors and other conversations we've been having with HR professionals, it matters very little, and it's really kind of not a major effect. Sustainability and ESG governance, interestingly, didn't come up as a major kind of trend and priority for next year that a lot of HR professionals were thinking about, that we were speaking with. The Great Resignation, it kind of feels like that has come to an end now, right? We're not necessarily in that period where it's employees driving that conversation. It very much feels like the dynamic has shifted now back to the employer, who is far more in control of what is going on with the careers and the future work prospects of employees. And we're seeing that, as we've already said, through the restructuring exercises that we're seeing popping up more and more and more across different sectors. So it's not necessarily now being driven by the employee, it's very much now being driven by the employer. Interestingly, climate change did not come up as a significant trend that a lot of our conversations we're having with people, it wasn't coming up in conversation a lot for things to think about for next year. And global instability, people were far more focused on what was actually happening here in the UK and less focused on what was happening out there in the wider world. Now, clearly, there's an argument to say, well, what's happening out there in the wider world will ultimately affect here in the UK, but everyone seemed very UK focused and not necessarily having an eye on that global view. But that's not everybody, right? That'll be very much dependent on some of the customers we have and how they're spread across, whether they are global or regional businesses, whether they're just UK businesses. And I found this one particularly interesting, that AI didn't come up as something that people were seeing was going to have a significant effect in their area. And a lot of the conversations that our colleagues have been having with professionals in the space, it feels like there is a general kind of hesitancy from HR around AI, just because of the nature of the data involved, and a hesitancy to kind of go all in on AI very early without fully understanding the ramifications of what would happen with that data if we was going to integrate things like, you know, ChatGPT language models into our world, not really understanding what the controls are around that data. So there was a general hesitancy from HR professionals to want to go head on and see that as a priority that they wanted to tap into. And as I said, this was all data completed by, you know, survey results from internal colleagues here at Ciphr, but those colleagues are having real world, real life conversations daily with customers, and therefore should be reflective of what's given here in terms of this is a reflection of how our customers are thinking and feeling, and our customers are all HR professionals. So as we kind of look, we've touched a little bit, we've mentioned it already, that there is some technical disruption, and clearly we are a HR software business, right? So our employees that completed this, our internal experts, our HR software professionals, we wanted to kind of get their view on all the things we've just spoken about there. What potential impact does that have on people's willingness to invest in HR specific technology as we look into 2024? And again, there were some interesting results that jumped out here. So 37% of our respondents internally said through the conversations they were having, organizations were looking to invest more in HR systems and technology. So over a third of organizations were looking to invest more. And this was being driven, we'll get into some of the reasons, but it's driven earlier, but there are specific reasons in what's driving that. 37%, so roughly the same, so they expected it to stay the same. They had already significantly invested in HR systems, and they didn't see that as being something that they were looking to grow. They were just looking to maintain that investment as we went forward. And actually 27% of our respondents said through the conversations they were having, organizations would be looking to cut costs in their HR software space. It was roughly kind of a third, right? They'd give it some minor slack either way, but there wasn't a huge disparity between them all. So what was kind of some of the reasons people we felt through the conversations we were having were looking to increase their investment in HR technology in 2024? So Catherine, I think I've lost there because we've skipped the header slide, but it's fine. I'll re-pick back up.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about the reasons why. So
no, that's fine. That's fine. No, that's all good. No, that's all good. So what are some of the reasons that people were seeing that kind of uptick, and where were we looking to place that investment? Well, the vast majority of people that were looking to invest more were actually planning to invest more in their central HR space. That was the primary kind of area that if people were going to invest more, that was the area that through the conversations we were having, we were hearing that people were going to invest. There was a similar kind of slight drop off into health and well-being, all the way down to actually compliance. And this is quite interesting. I think this is what's interesting about the way the world of HR technology has moved on. If we would have asked this, 10 years ago, compliance would have been one of the biggest drivers as an investment in HR technology. And actually how much further the conversation has moved on now, that there are other things that are far higher up on the list as priority for investment than compliance. It's never going to go away. It's always an integral part of what we do. But it wasn't necessarily the biggest reason leading to investment as we move forward. These other categories you see here were far bigger reasons, which was really interesting. And others, just for awareness, other areas that aren't on this chart that had received still significant votes for investment were onboarding, payroll software, and employee engagement and survey tools were kind of ranking quite high up. They didn't quite make this top 6, if you like, on this chart, but they were other areas that HR professionals were very much considering as investments for 2024. So moving on, what were the kind of major drivers behind that investment? So we kind of touched on this a little bit when we looked at those trends, and we are seeing those wash through, right, in the conversations we're having as to the drivers behind it. So cost saving to efficiencies is definitely up there. Companies are becoming very cost conscious as we go into 2024 through those rising costs of doing business and the cost of living. And they're looking for opportunities where they can be more efficient and save costs. And that is definitely coming out as a big reason for investment. Better analytics and reporting. So this is a space where HR are really craving that additional benefit that systems can bring to them. And for too long, kind of HR has almost been not had that voice necessarily at board level. And we are seeing that as we go into 24, there is a real shift in that dynamic. And lots of our employees are having conversations with our customers where there's an appetite to give HR more of a voice And in order to have more of a voice, there needs to be a more robust set of data and analytics that backs up that voice to give them the credibility in that space. Better integrations, you know, HR is becoming more technologically advanced. We have far more systems now than we ever have before. And our colleagues have absolutely said that integrations is something that is coming up regularly through the conversations that they are having. And we said here about efficiencies, user experience is also very, very important. And then we start to go into kind of the automation of HR tasks, which you probably see as quite a traditional kind of benefit, but still sticks around in terms of the benefits of driving a HR system investment. And, you know, clearly remote hybrid doesn't show any signs of going away. Having systems and tools being able to manage that more effectively was a real significant reason for driving that investment into HR products. And I wanted to just share next some of the kind of specific kind of verbatim quotes that were shared by colleagues here at Ciphr based on the conversations that they've been having. And, you know, there were some common themes that started to emerge around these verbatim comments. And we've got a selection here, but definitely this sense that, you know, HR teams, that they're being tasked more and more to spin more and more plates, and they are having far bigger roles to play within the organization. And any tools they can get to make their life more efficient enables them to cater for those extra plates that they're being asked to spin. So there's definitely a make me more efficient so I can work on some of these more strategic projects maybe that I'm being given, and some of these additional plates that I've not had to spin before, but I'm now being given the responsibility to drive forward. We are seeing, as we've said before, these comments around the challenge of being tasked to do more with less. You know, how can we make necessarily headcount savings, cost savings, efficiencies within the organization, but we need to be able to do more as a business and still continue to grow. So there's definitely a drive towards how do we invest in tech and make data-driven decisions that help us do more with less. Hybrid remote working, as we said, it's not going away. It's still there. It still exists. And there is absolutely that how do we get the tools working to make sure that we're delivering the best possible hybrid and remote working experience for our colleagues so we don't lose them. You know, we mentioned earlier about the trend of skill shortage is still there. It's stubborn. It hasn't gone away. It's not going to go away anytime soon. So we need to make sure we're retaining as many people as we possibly can. Budgets are tighter, definitely. So there are some kind of nice to haves that are going to get scrapped off the list and maybe parked for a future date. So we need to evidence that that investment on the software is valid and it's going to deliver the benefits that it said it was going to bring. Spoke lots about cost savings and efficiencies, which are captured on some of these other ones. And interestingly, just to wrap up on this piece, that the recruitment market, we know it's been tight and that skill shortage still exists out there. There is definitely a move towards customers talking to us about more efficient hiring technology and processes as to how they can speed up that and get better quality data on the hires so they're making better quality decisions at the front end, whilst also delivering a better candidate experience for their potential employees. So this was just some of the verbatim comment detail that sat behind some of those charts that we spun through earlier. Now, what we wanted to do and kind of as we add into the second half of this webinar was just pick out 5 of those really big significant challenges that our people had identified through this survey, and then just spend a bit of time talking about those challenges in a little bit more detail as to what those challenges are, and then some potential things that we should all be considering about. So if that's a challenge that's being spotted down there on the frontline conversation, what do we need to be thinking about as HR leaders to bridge that gap between the high level strategy that we're thinking about with some tangible action that could be delivered to make sure it's being felt down there on the front line. So just to pick out what these kind of significant challenges were that were highlighted as a result of this survey, there are a number, right? There's more than 5 on here. But what we're going to do is we're going to deep dive into the ones that have got the biggest red bar, okay? The ones where we were hearing and talking about the fact that these are being seen as the most significant challenges, and they are 5 that there's 5 that we've picked out from this chart here. But just for transparency, these were all of the challenges that were identified as part of that survey looking ahead for 2024. So let's delve into challenge number one, right? Finding the right talent in a difficult marketplace. This doesn't show any signs of going away. We are still in that world where it is difficult to find talent, and the challenges people are having is we're being stretched. We don't necessarily have that capacity within the organization, within talent teams, within line managers to run some of those processes and to run them effectively. So we're looking for ways to do it more efficiently. We have the challenge of wanting to deliver a great candidate experience, offering realistic experience of the role. That's a real big one, is how do we convey that? How do we let people know what it's actually like working here? What's the real life going to look like when you join? Recruiting in those hybrid and remote only roles continues to be a challenge, as well as the diversity of hires. You know, we still haven't cracked that in terms of that being something we would tick as being really comfortable. That is still being seen as a challenge, is how do we improve diversity through that process? So some potential solutions that emerged through the research that we had conducted. It's interesting, the AI is not popping up there massively on the priority list, but there are some amazing AI tools out there for CV screening, for candidate matching and interview scheduling that may just lighten the load on talent teams. And this was quite an interesting one. We did something ourselves around this here at Ciphr internally around utilizing AI. And our head of talent put a post out about it. And actually, it was got into quite a controversial post where people were kind of, you know, should we be using AI to make some of those automated decisions? And I think it's interesting to see how this is going to evolve over time, where it becomes an assistant, but isn't ultimately making any kind of decision on the hire, but is supporting the hiring managers and talent teams by giving them better quality data on candidates in which to make a decision. Virtual reality assessments. So we are seeing that as a trend emerging within larger organizations, and also filtering down to some of the startups that are quite out there at kind of the leading edge. But how do we give an accurate representation of our environments and what it's like? Well, virtual reality, you know, there's some great tools out there now that helps bridge that gap to give people a sense of what it would actually be like doing the job. Using chatbots for an efficiency reason for screening and QA. There's some amazing language models out there now that people can tap into, and they absolutely can help gauge quite early, both from a candidate point of view and an employee point of view, does this feel like the right match? Does this feel like the right kind of organization I want to join? And does this feel like the right person we would like to join? On-site and hybrid role considerations, so the need to kind of adapt preferences for remote, for people that might be coming in only part of the time, is how do we evolve those processes to ensure that people are still getting the soft skills, the training, development that they need when they are in the organization. And then skills-based hiring. This was a really interesting one. Again, there is some real focus on this at the moment in terms of, in order to improve diversity, how do we focus more on the skill rather than get distracted by potentially the CV? Now, the CV is a great indicator, but what we want to be able to do is assess someone's tangible skill for the role. And sometimes people have developed skills that are absolutely right for the role that you wouldn't necessarily associate they've developed with the roles that they've had. Because we don't know all of the skills that they've gained through the roles they've had unless we assess it. So it's a really interesting one that's emerging as a potential solution and there are some great tools out there that enable you to skills assess people prior to ever joining the organization. And we know that when you invest in those tools, it actually broadens the scope of people who could potentially be fit for those roles. So it's a really interesting one to overcome those challenges. The next significant challenge that was highlighted was offering competitive salary and benefits packages. So we are definitely out of this process now in terms of the Great Resignation was driving up those salary costs, but we are seeing the elevated costs of business now kind of coming home to roost. So how do we remain competitive in those environments and still offer great benefits packages when we're being tasked with the business around cost savings? There's some interesting stuff here. So challenges, Lack of pay transparency, people not really understanding why I'm getting paid what I'm paid, and how do those decisions get made in terms of increments, uplifts, how are those being made, and are those being made fairly? Inconsistencies around flexible working arrangements, demand for more comprehensive wellbeing support. We saw that as a major trend that was coming out in the conversation, and that is filtering through to the challenges that we see here. Overlooking diversity of employees and their needs, not considering everybody within the organisation. Some of the challenges around a lack of time or skills to make informed decisions about reward packages, and commuting, with many people through the pandemic recruiting people in remote roles and maybe a lot further away than you have historically done. As some of those organisations are now transitioning people back into the workplace, the commuting costs and the distances are really starting to become a factor and a challenge that we need to work through as organisations. So what are some of those potential solutions? Well, pay transparency. Can we provide clear information on how pay is determined and promote fairness? And how do we have a process that promotes fairness and builds trust with colleagues? Flexible working arrangements. So are we ensuring that we are comfortable that colleagues know how they can access that? Are we comfortable that that process is fair? And are we comfortable that we're then supporting colleagues as they transition into those flexible working arrangements? Expanded wellness programs. So are we including mental health support in those programs? And are we including financial wellness initiatives alongside the cost of living, which shows no sign of abating as we go into 2024? Are we ensuring that we are supporting our colleagues where we can from a financial wellness perspective? Diversity. So is there a focus on diversity and inclusion, particularly in consideration to compensation packages? Do we understand through data where we may have disparities between different groups within our organisation? And are we clear on why those disparities exist, if they exist at all? And what's our plan to go and remedy that, to ensure that everybody is having a fair and equitable experience of salary and compensation packages? AI. So how can we use AI to analyse compensation data in order to make more informed decisions? So if we're not capable of drawing the conclusions from the data ourselves, can we use AI tools to support us in understanding what the data is telling us in order to address some of those compensation and benefit package challenges within our organisation? And are we offering remote work options as part of the compensation package to cater to those changing expectations of the workforce? More people are expecting there to be remote work environments based on the work that we've done over the last few years. So do we have compensation packages that reflect those environments? Skill shortage is our next one. So again, been around for a while now. This isn't going away anytime soon. So challenges: how do we retain and recruit the best talent? Skill shortages: how do we address that in a super competitive market? And technology and ethical situations, like how much can we push technology in addressing the skill shortage, and how do we stay the right side then of the ethical line in terms of making those decisions about the skills people have and the skills that people require before we hire them? So some potential solutions: do we implement analytics tool and train ourselves on how to use them? That is HR often, overlook themselves in terms of that analytics investment, our analytical skills. Are we making that investment in our own skill sets in order to understand and interpret data to make decisions around where the skills gaps are in our organisation and putting action plans in place to address that? Are we doing enough work to align HR metrics with our business goals? So if we need to raise the priority of an investment in skills, which is required, are we doing enough to understand what the data is telling us and present a vision of that to our boards, our executive leadership teams, to really ensure that we get that investment over the line, because there is an impact on the organisation's goals if we do not address that skill shortage. how are we using data to understand the colleagues' experience and which colleagues are requiring that investment internally to make sure that we keep hold of that top talent? And then what are we doing to drive engagement around that to make sure we don't lose that talent? We find it's so hard to go out there and recruit it. What are we doing to make sure we keep hold of our talent, and how are we using data to understand the experience they're having and how could it be introduced? So are we using technology to gain access to market data and carry out personal data analysis? So what technologies are we using to understand the broader trends across the market when it comes to skill shortages? And are we then confident that we can use that data to put strategies in place to address that for our own organization? And you know, this has kind of come up on all of them so far, is how are we using AI to help us with that? If we can't necessarily find the answers ourselves, what tools could we use out there in the marketplace where AI could be doing some of that heavy lifting on the analysis for us? Are we basing decisions about compensation and recruitment on real-time data, or is the data out of date? So what do we need to do to get to a place where it's more real-time, it's more live? And are we prioritizing well-being in the company culture to aid that talent retention, to make sure that people are having great experiences with us? And what are we doing about that to actively address any well-being challenges that colleagues may well be having? Next one was, how do we get HR's voice heard, okay, at the most senior level of the organization? So what are some of the potential challenges around this? That there is still a lingering, not everywhere, but there is in pockets, still this lingering, we're just regarded as HR, just HR, we don't have that voice. We're seen more as potentially an administrative function. Again, not everywhere, but this does happen still today. How do we therefore make your voice heard as HR professionals, even if potentially you've already got a seat in that boardroom table? How do we then make the voice, amplify it even more, make it even louder? There's a lack of recognition sometimes around the strategic contribution that HR can bring. The business value of its people isn't necessarily clear, and underutilization of HR technology. You know, our CEO, Sean, always asks a really interesting question around this, which is, what percentage of an organization's P&L is its people? And it's always the largest percentage, always the biggest. And if it's the biggest percentage of the P&L, and HR are responsible for making sure our people are having a great experience and delivering what they need in order to grow and develop, surely logic would dictate that it deserves a voice at that board level, because it's the biggest ticket item on our P&L. So what are those potential solutions? So how do we position HR as a strategic and trusted advisor to leadership, you know, guiding acquisition strategies and workforce planning? So what work needs to be done around making sure you guys are positioned, and how do we make sure that you are equipped, or you make sure yourselves are equipped with the data and the tools to back up any of those strategic recommendations that you may well start to plan? We need to get to a place where HR acts as a problem solver, right? Where we are seen as the ones who can address really complex workforce issues and challenges, and that from what conflicts with, you know, resolutions around talent retention. How do we make sure that you guys have that voice in order to be seen as that problem solver? Become a mentor or a coach. You know, what opportunities are there within the organization to nurture talent within HR across sectors? So there will be some HR professionals that really, you know, have already made great strides with this and have amazing, you know, voices and are heard by their board and are extremely valuable. What obligation is there on those professionals to now give back to other HR professionals across the piece, to help mentor and coach them to understand how they can also elevate their voice within the HR board space? How do we align HR strategies towards the company goals and fostering a united workforce culture? That's a critical one in this. Is are the business seeing that there's strategies in HR that have direct links to business benefits, and how are we able to measure that and play that back at board level to understand the ROI of that HR investment, and link culture to performance. So how do we arrive at a place where we can understand the links between making great strides in a positive culture and then the tangible business benefits that can bring? And a lot of this is underpinned by technology. Technology needs to be able to give you guys the data you need to go back and evidence the impact of any of those HR initiatives that you're getting. And that technology needs you to be able to relay that data in a way that is very kind of board friendly, talks their language, and gets the point across as to what HR professionals are adding to value to the business. And that links very heavily then into our last challenge, is how do we do that, right? How do we get to a place where we are making better quality data-driven decisions? So what are the challenges out there? Definitely the quality of the data. Are we comfortable that we've got governance processes in place to ensure that we are capturing the right data and it's of good quality? Are we considering, as we're doing that, the privacy and ethical considerations, because we are dealing with very sensitive data around people? How does that sit against some of those integrations with other data sources? So are we comfortable that we are A, integrating with other data sources where they add value, and B, that we have considered the privacy and ethical considerations of now integrating and combining data sets in order to make strategic decisions on people ultimately? And how do we shift the culture within HR so there is a greater level of data literacy? That is definitely a challenge. And how do we as HR professionals invest more in our ability to improve data literacy? So what are some of the solutions? So invest in analytics tools and training. So are we prioritizing this? Are we ensuring that we can adopt user-friendly analytics tools? And are we then investing in the training to make sure we can leverage the benefit of those tools? Are we ensuring that we are aligning HR metrics with the organizations of the goal? So aligning them with the organization goal ensures that data-driven decisions support the overall business strategy, which is a critical component of this. Another solution is, how do we use data for talent retention? So HR departments should absolutely use data analysis to show the bottom line impact of activities such as reporting on employee engagement levels, company culture, job satisfaction. This helps make informed decisions to retain top talent and boost performance. Investing in technology for access to information. So are we making sure that we are investing and then utilizing technology for data collection about people and the broader market, so we can give us competitive edge out there in that space? And are we ensuring that we are effectively analyzing that data so it aids informed decision making? Adoption of AI-powered HR solutions. So these are coming. You know, there's more and more investment from HR companies in how can we get AI working in the world of HR and get HR comfortable with AI pointed at people data. So AI-powered solutions such as AI learning are increasingly being used to support learning and growth. Investment in such solutions can bring absolutely significant, benefits, and we are seeing that as a trend to help fix that skill shortage gap and ensure that people have got bespoke development plans that are targeted for their specific job role. Access to live and updates data. So is our data live? Is it current? How comfortable and confident are we of that? Because in order to drive a solution on this, we're going to need better quality data, and we need it refreshed more regularly, so we're getting a live view of anything that's going on in our organization, people related, and therefore we're able to act accordingly. And how do we, reimagine company cultures for wellness? So it's absolutely crucial, as we all know, for HR leaders to prioritize the well-being of our colleagues. How do we use technology to support that and ensure that we stay competitive? But ultimately, how do we create a company culture that really values the well-being of our employees to make sure that it is a place that people want to stay? And and how are we using the data to understand where those pinch points are and therefore go and solve them. So these are some of the, again, don't profess to be able to cover all of them today, but we've got the top 5 in here, and hopefully that's just sparks some thinking. Hopefully there's some stuff that resonates in there around maybe some challenges that people have experienced on this call. And maybe there's a few things there to think about as part of the solution. And we could spend more time on each of these, delving into more detail. We haven't got that time today, but we would love to do more of this for our customers here at Ciphr. So to that point, Ciphr will be launching a new series of workshops in 2024 called Amplify HR. Now, these workshops will be exclusively available to customers of Ciphr products. And what we will be doing through these workshops is deep diving into each of those challenges, those significant kind of challenges that we've spoken about there. And we will be drawing upon subject matter experts in each of these fields to really workshop these and give our customers tangible actions to go away with, and ideas and thinking to go and drive improvements in these areas in their business. So these will be available for all of our customers to join. I think this is a great opportunity for our customers to connect with other customers, to understand what's going on in each other's worlds and answer some of the questions themselves. And if you would like to be invited, if you are a customer of Ciphr on this webinar and you would like to join any of these workshops, if you could just type into the Q&A box in this webinar, invite me. Ciphr and I will then be collating that data afterwards, and I will then be communicating out to all of the customers that express an interest with what the next steps are in order to get yourselves booked onto any one or all of these workshops as we go through the year. And I'm really looking forward to this. I think this is going to be a great opportunity to engage with our customers around topics that are very live, very relevant, and we'll workshop them to come up with some of the solutions to these challenges. Catherine, that's my piece done. I'm gonna hand back to you if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, of course. Thanks, Bradley. Really appreciate you taking us through all of that data and offering your insight as to sort of digging a bit deeper into those challenges and potential solutions. And I think the workshops for our customers will be a way just to go to that into more detail. You can meet some other Ciphr users and just kind of discuss mutual challenges and ways you set up the system, or other tips and tricks, which is always great to learn from your peers. So I can see lots of people, which is great, asking to be invited. So that's really positive. So if you're a customer and you want to be invited along, it's no obligation, we won't hold you to it. Maybe you just want to know a bit more. Yeah, invite me into the question box. We do have a bit more time now just to dive into some questions you might have for Bradley, or any thoughts you might want to share off the back of this webinar. So if you have any of those, please just use the same question box and share those in. For those of you who've joined, this whole session has been recorded, and the recording will be emailed to you automatically, so you can revisit any of the slides or the information at any time at your leisure. I will share it with a colleague who wasn't able to attend, so don't worry, that has all been recorded. No questions coming in at the moment, but I just want to ask you, Bradley, we covered those 5 areas in some detail. Is there any one of those in particular that really stands out as if we don't sort this soon as a profession, then we're really going to be in trouble? Sort of like, what's sort of the #1 priority out of those top 5 as you see it?
For me, I feel like everything we've shared and spoke about there's one common thread that runs through all of it, which is the solutions often rely on us having really robust data and the ability to interrogate that data and analyze it to make those decisions about where we're going to go and invest that time, that energy and effort to fix things. So for me, I think the #1 point that jumps out for me from that is, how do we get to a place where HR as a sector has invested heavily in tools to help with this? But how do we get to a place where HR feel like they're getting maximum value from the data and analytics that those tools are sharing with them? and they feel comfortable and confident in their ability to analyze those data to make those key decisions around where to go and invest next. Because we are seeing it everywhere, right? Everyone is becoming more challenged around resource, headcount, where can we make savings, where can we make efficiencies. If we've got to do more with less, we need to make sure the things we are going to go and spend time on are worth spending time on, because they are going to give us the biggest win as a result of spending time on them. And that's only going to come through better quality data-driven decisions. So I think the number one thing for me is, how do we as a HR profession get more comfortable in that world of data analytics? And how can we be comfortable and confident that the tools we're invested in are repaying that investment in the level of data they're giving us?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a perennial challenge. Like, you know, I've both been in HR for a while, and that challenge hasn't been solved yet, and it's certainly not going to go away. But finding like the cost-effective route to sort of train yourself up on that can be quite difficult. I mean, one option, we're quite fortunate that we've got quite a lot of analytics-minded staff here at Ciphr. We're building a small data team. That's one, you know, if you have a team internally that you can turn to for advice, somebody who's used to crunching the numbers to kind of mentor you, that's kind of one option. Another option could be turn to your HR software provider and see what support they can give in additional training in terms of using the data functionality, or even, for example, we offer outsourced services, so we can help with reporting. Your provider, whether it's Ciphr or not, might offer another, additional support that you can request. Google can be your friend. Like we've had people in my team do Udemy courses on using Excel. Like if you don't know if the tools are out there or it's on YouTube. Are there any other sources of like training that you can, beyond those that I've just mentioned, Bradley, that I'm like overlooking that might be helpful?
Yeah, do you know, sometimes, I know this is going to sound really strange, but sometimes even things as simple as YouTube can really be your friend, right? When you're really getting stuck, and you can just jump on YouTube and there's a nice little explainer video that someone else has done all of the hard work to create, and you can just reap the benefit of that. But yeah, you know, I think you've absolutely kind of tackled the big highlights there, Catherine, and we are seeing more and more HR teams at the mature end of the scale bringing in dedicated HR analytical roles into their teams. And I think that is a trend that will just continue to build as we go through the years to come, because data-driven decision making is it, right? That's the only game in town now when it comes to HR. So we need to get better at that. And it's hard as well, right? So I'm a HR professional by my background, and we didn't, as HR professionals, we tend to be people-orientated people, right? And I lose count of how many conversations I have with other HR professionals where they say, "But I'm not technical. You know, that's not me. I get my energy from people. I like, you know, interacting with people." The challenge we've got is we've got to get to a place where HR see themselves as technical, and what's the right level of technical for HR. And I'd love to, through our series of workshops that I've just shared there with our customers, I'd love to explore that in more detail to understand our customers' perceptions of what's the right level of technical skill that we should have within HR. And then, you know, rightly throw the gauntlet down to organizations like us to say, well, how can you help us on that journey to become more technical? I'd love to engage in that conversation through that series of workshops to see what everyone's thoughts and opinions are on that.
Yeah, and that's why you've got a data analytics specific one in the summer. Yeah, that's all in the diary, ready to go. There's just one comment come through. When we touched on like immigration and skills shortages, somebody's asking about the changes to the skilled worker route that were announced just before Christmas, and what the potential impact might be on our customers. It might be too soon to tell, you know, with that being just launched just before Christmas, to work through the ramifications of that for customers at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And I know it will start to come up in the conversations that we are having, right, as we go into the new year. And, you know, almost this survey was done prior to that, right? So it'd be great to do a deep dive session on that alone. But it is a both significant challenge and solution, right? It's both sides of the coin, in terms of we have that skill shortage alongside potential tightening up of immigration rules. but then we see potentially that immigration is a solution to some of this. Yeah, so I mean, maybe that, you know, later as we get into the second half of next year and we kind of get that embedded, that could also be a great idea for a workshop in the second half of the year, right? In terms of understanding what has been the impact of that and what are people doing that they could share and help others with, definitely.
Sure. That's all the questions we've had come in. So I will give everyone 5 minutes back, and we'll just close the webinar by saying thanks so much for participating, everyone who's joined us today. Thanks, Bradley, for sharing your insight and recapping the results of that survey. As I mentioned, if you've been watching this live, this is being recorded and the recording will be shared with you shortly, so you can rewatch it or share it with a colleague. If you'd like to learn more about Ciphr solutions, you can opt in using the exit form on your screen after the broadcast, or you can email us at info@ciphr.com. You can also use that exit survey to just give us a bit of feedback about today's broadcast. We always welcome your comments, ideas and queries, just so we can keep improving the webinar programme. And a reminder for customers, if you haven't requested your invite to the upcoming series of workshops, just type invite me into the question box now before we close. Thanks, Bradley, appreciate your time today. No, it's not always the easiest first full week back in January, but we got there, and hopefully lots of food for thought for everyone. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, and let me see you at another webinar again soon. Take care, thanks so much. Bye.